Hello and welcome back to the third and final part of the Icelandic Billionaire Experiment. This time we've gone 18 years in the future since last time, and a lot has happened in that time. First of all though, we're in the Iceland screen for the national team. If we have a quick look at the world rankings, clicked on the wrong thing there. If we go to world rankings here, we can see that they've reached a height of 32nd at one point. So doesn't look like they've won a World Cup, unfortunately, for Iceland. That was kind of what a byproduct of this was hopefully going to be, them winning the World Cup if we really improved the Icelandic level of football. But apparently it's not happened. They dropped down to a low of 93rd very recently, but back up to 66th now in the world. If we look at the national team very quickly as well, we can see some good players coming through. This chap at the moment, at the end, I'm not going to try and pronounce at all, 180 potential ability at 23, but he's still playing in Iceland himself, so that ability isn't quite going to get there. He's not going to get the game time that he needs against top quality opposition in a good league, so he's not going to reach 180 by looks of things at 23 years old and currently 138. If we actually sort it in order properly though, there's actually two other guys who are also on 180 potential ability, and these two have a chance of getting there. They may have to move away from Iceland though, because they may suffer the same fate as this guy Gunnar, but John and Johan obviously have very good potential and have quite good current abilities for their age. 154 at 22 years old, he may actually reach that 180 potential ability, which would be quite cool. In the under-21s, there's a 17-year-old here with 111 current ability with a potential of 166. I reckon he could reach that maybe if he keeps his development going at the same rate. 111 current ability at 17 is really, really good. And then in the under-19, the best guy here, Sam Sturgis for Viking at R. Current ability of 82, but a potential ability of 137 is the best. No one in the under-19s probably going to make it big anywhere, unfortunately. Just flicking through their schedule quickly, by looks of things, I don't think they've actually qualified for any World Cup or anything like that. I see World Cup qualifiers and European Championship qualifiers, but I don't see them actually in anything at all. So they've not qualified for any international tournament throughout the entirety of this experiment, which is quite disappointing. But I guess for a nation as small as Iceland, it's going to be hard to continually get into international competitions. Right, let's have a look at the Icelandic Premier Division then. As you can see, in competition reputation, it's jumped up to 9th in reputation rankings. We'll look at the European coefficient actually, to see exactly where it is and things like that, because that's a bit more accurate actually. I just want to see Europe, please. That's what I want to see. I'm better to go here, through to Europe, and then we find, for club coefficients, as you can see here, Iceland sitting 9th. Now these numbers to me don't mean a huge amount, but I think this jump from a 5.6 to a 32.7 means that they must have done very, very well in Europe over the past season, perhaps. As you can see though, it's still quite far off the Belgian league and still a long way off these top 7 leagues, I suppose. So it's a long way off, only just better than Greek and the Dutch leagues there. So it's sitting quite comfortably in 9th, but it's still a long way off getting into that top 7. We have got 18 years to look through though, so that is a lot to look through. So I think we're going to click on past winners instead rather than look through every single league every single time. Obviously we put £1 billion back into these clubs and into £1 billion into the first division. We'll look at the first division in a minute as well. But as you can see here, we left it on 2025 when Viking at O won it. The next season Valor won it, then Viking at O, then Valor won it. And then the rest of the time has been absolutely dominated by Viking at O or Viking at R. Now, I presume these teams are rivals. I've not checked actually. If we look at general, other rivalries are competitive with Viking at O. So HK are actually the local rivals to Viking at R. Viking at O, who do they consider their big rival being? If you look at their general, Viking at O are competitive once again. Stажran are their competitive rivals. So I don't think they're actually perhaps located similar places. I mean, I don't know much about Icelandic geography, so I won't be able to tell you too much. But I thought these two with the same names would have been from the same place, but apparently they're only other rivals, so it can't be that big. Either way though, as you can see, they have absolutely dominated it. Stажran getting a second in there as a Valor every now and again, but it's one of these two sides winning it every single year since 2029, which is ridiculous really. I've just had a flick through to see what the biggest transfer has been over the past few years as well, and it was 2032 was the biggest one. Walter Rios moved from a team in China to Viking at over 39 million. Unfortunately we can't click on them anymore, but if we look in more recent years, another 39 million was there. Victor Diaz from Benfica to Viking at R. He's still around. Is he still at Viking? I know he's back at Sporting now. His career, how did that go? He's played most of his career actually in Iceland, however barely made any appearances for Viking at R. Despite them spending 39 million on him, he went on loan straight away. Spent most of his career on loan. He barely made any appearances actually for Viking at R, which I find bizarre considering how much they paid for him, and then sold him for £450,000, which, I mean, I don't understand that. Perhaps he wasn't very good, but 39 million spent on him is ridiculous amount of money for him not to be playing barely any football as well. 35 million there. Once again, another player coming in from China to Viking at R. Is he still there at all? He's a scout now. He's retired, so that's not too interesting. Going forward once again, 33 million there, 33 million right to 44 million from Viking at R to Viking at O. That's interesting. Elson Lopez, the Portuguese man, still at Viking at O, came in on a free from Juventus for Viking at R. So that's a pretty good piece of business, I think, selling for 36 million to Viking. A quick look at the first division as well. That's seen the first division jump up to 39th overall in the rankings. So the Icelandic first division is now as good as the Premier Division was when we first started this experiment, because the first division was 44th or so, but it was just behind League One, and this first division now is just behind League One, so it's risen a long way as well. If we look at the past winners here, we can see that it's sort of the same teams that get promoted every time, so they sort of go up, get relegated again. A lot of yo-yo teams around by the looks of things, and lots of different winners, of course, but a few of them been there a few times, so a lot of yo-yos there. IBV, for example, Selfoss being there a little bit. This team here that I can't pronounce, again, I'm not going to even try and pronounce it, but that's difficult. I mean, how do you even go about saying that name? Someone told me in the comments how to pronounce names. I had to go at doing it before I started recording to see if I could actually say his names, and I can't, so I do apologise. Thank you for all your effort telling me how to pronounce names, but I just can't do it. How do you even make sense of that? The Icelandic Cup, also very similar. Viking at O winning it most times. Viking at R win it quite a few times as well. But a few teams in there dotted around that have won it as well. Not some big names. KA, they're not a huge name. They're in the first division, I think. Oh, they're in the Premier Division actually. But this team must be in the first division. I can't see them before. Okay, they're in the Premier Division too. We'll ignore what I said. about the first division sides winning it. They're not. It's Premier Division sides winning it. Right, we're going to check out the Champions League now to see if anyone has done anything decent in the Champions League from Icelandic football. So we're going all the way back to the 2025 season to see if any Icelandic teams are in it. I'm just going to skip forward every now and again, and I basically can look out for Icelandic nations that I can see, but I can't see any Icelandic teams right now getting into the first knockout rounds of the Champions League. It was going to be far-fetched for a team to get here, but I thought someone might have done it by now, but apparently not. We're still skipping forward, and I still can't see any Icelandic teams. I guarantee I'm going to miss one at some point. But as we come forward, still no Icelandic team there. It's all the usual teams right now, I'm afraid. Red Bull Salzburg getting in there, that's not a normal team to get. I know Red Bull Leipzig would perhaps be there, but Red Bull Salzburg, that's a bit different there. Going forward still, it's not happening. There's no Icelandic teams in the knockout stages of the Champions League by looks of things. I mean, there's a few years left, but unfortunately, it's not happened. Not happened. Well, that was quite disappointing actually looking at that, but we'll look at the Europa League now, or the Euro Cup as it's called in this, and see if any Icelandic teams have made it. We know they get to the group stages quite consistently, but have they made it past these group stages? Now, it takes a little bit longer to look at all the nations here to see if I can see any Icelandic, but I can't see anything so far as we come through the late 2020s. Coming forward still, again, oh, there's one. Viking at O made it, but they lost to Club Brugge in the 28-29 season. So Viking at O losing 4-2 on aggregate to Club Brugge. Viking at R also there as well, but lose to Fiorentina. So there's two Icelandic teams making it there, which is the first time we've seen them in the knockout stages in quite some time. I think someone's made it before, but not consistently. This year, though, 2029-30, Viking at O and Viking at R both make it through, beating Besiktas and Marseille, respectively. If we look at the second knockout round then, where are they? Viking at R beat Krasnodar, but Viking at O lose to Partizan. So Viking at R go into the quarterfinals, where they lose to Ajax, unfortunately. But that's the furthest we've seen an Icelandic team get so far in any European competition. So 2029-30 season, Viking at R quarterfinals. Back to the first knockout round and a season further on. Viking at O lose to Marseille this time round. They beat them last time. Viking at R don't seem to be there by looks of things. The season afterwards, Viking at R lose to Liverpool, and Valor are in it this time. Actually, that's interesting. Valor coming up there for the first time. They lose to Celtic, though, unfortunately. They've had a good attempt there to try and get through, but lost narrowly 3-1 on aggregate, despite winning the second leg 1-0. Season afterwards, Viking at O there, but lose to CSK Moscow. This is more like it now. We're seeing more teams more regularly here in European competitions. Viking at R lose to Sporting 4-1 on aggregate, rather, I should say. Season after that, Viking at O lose to Olympiacos on penalties, which is really frustrating, but I can't see any other teams there, which is a bit unusual. Viking at R losing the season afterwards to CSK Moscow. We're seeing a bit of a theme here. They get to the first knockout stages, but very rarely get past them. 35-36, not a single Icelandic team there, which is a bit of a shame. Season afterwards looks to be... Oh, it's not the same. Viking R lose to PSV, which is, again, not quite what we want to see. We want to see more than this. Season afterwards, Viking at O get there. They beat Fiorentina on away goals, 1-1 draw, but they win on away goals, which is pretty nice to see. In the second round, though, they come up against Roma. They win the second leg 1-0, but got beat in the first leg 2-1. So that's very unfortunate for them. If we go the year afterwards, Viking at O are there again, actually, in the second round. They beat Bordeaux, so we'll stick in the second round now. Viking at O beating Bordeaux 3-1 on aggregate there. They go into the quarterfinals, where they beat Standard Liège 2-1 on aggregate, going through to the semi-finals and face either Valencia, Borussia Mönchengladbach and Marseille. Semi-finals, they lose to Marseille 4-0 on aggregate. But a semi-final for Viking at O is quite incredible, really. We'll stick with the second knockout round for these later stages of the competition now. No one in it in the 39-40 season. 40-41 season, no one there again. 41-42 season. Viking at O face Viking at R in the second round. Viking at R getting the better of them there, winning 3-2 on aggregate. Quarterfinals, Viking at R lose to Arsenal 3-1 on aggregate though, which is very disappointing there. Arsenal obviously just dropping further and further down. They're not getting Champions League, they're still getting Europa League football even in the 2040s. That's not very good if you're an Arsenal fan. 2042-43 season though, Viking at R do beat Athletic Bilbao 4-0 on aggregate, thrashing them to go into the quarterfinals. Where in the quarterfinals they beat Villarreal 3-1, so they go into the semi-finals where they come up against Borussia Mönchengladbach and lose on penalties. How agonising is that? They lose on penalties and Tottenham go and win the final. So very unfortunate there for them. The season afterwards, which is the current season actually, it's the first knockout round. Are there any Icelandic teams here? Viking at O are there and they play Marseille, but obviously the Icelandic season is a bit different in terms of how they're timed compared to the rest of Europe. So this starts technically next season for Iceland, but the same current season for European sides. It's a bit complicated, but that's what it is. And there we go. That is the end of the experiment. Unfortunately, an Icelandic team just missed out on winning a top continental competition. 2 semi-finals are pretty decent for an Icelandic side, but couldn't quite make it to the finals and win it. Unfortunately as well, the Icelandic national team really didn't do much, to be fair. They were pretty poor. I did expect a lot more from them. I thought all these fantastic Icelandic regions were going to come through and be really, really good players for them, but unfortunately, it just didn't happen. We're going to have another Billionaire experiment coming out at the weekend, but I'm not going to tell you too much about it yet. We're going to keep it under wraps for now until Sunday. It's going to be slightly different in terms of how we finance the clubs, and it's going to be a league that someone has suggested, but it's not been a very common suggestion, but I thought it'd be quite an interesting one to do. So thank you very much for watching today's episode. If you've enjoyed it, please do drop a like on the video. Subscribe to the channel if you're new around here, and I'll see you next time for some more Billionaire action.